Adolescence and emerging adulthood is a natural, dynamic path of all developing students. As popularly mentioned by G. Stanley Hall, the founder of the scholarly study, students in this category today experience a great deal of storm and stress as a standard part of their development. We as teachers of the modern era have a duty of care to educate equitably, remain observant and attentive to all students, acknowledge their internal and external developments, as well as meet the 7 learning objectives as outlined in the Australian Professional Standards for Teachers. The public are often unaware of the strategies teachers must meet to develop educated students that exude autonomy, logic, and character. These are incorporated in the Australian framework through integrative ICT, intercultural understanding, critical thinking activities, and ethic and moral discussions. This is on top of the literacy and numeracy expectations set out in the NAPLAN. We are introduced to Kayla through a detailed vignette as a concerned teacher. The analysis of this gives us educators the chance to identify developmental issues, demonstrate strategies to assist Kayla at school, and articulate the pros and cons in the intention of increasing Kayla's learning capabilities. It is shown through Kayla's personality and behavior that she is experiencing biopsychosocial stimulatives, that is, biological, cognitive, and social development issues that lead her to performing as she is. In our analysis, we will focus on the social and biological aspects.
Kayla is physically more developed than the other girls in her grade and mingles with kids older than her age. It is identified in the vignette that Kayla is physically more mature than her peers. This is an issue as the effects of early maturation in girls are mostly negative. When maturing earlier than your peers for girls creates higher risk for a variety of problems. These problems include depressed mood, negative body image, eating disorders, substance use, delinquency, school problems, and conflicts with parents. In females, the stimulation of hair growth and the promotion of mammary gland developed can be attributed to the combination of estrogen. In regards to Kayla being physically more mature than the students in her grade, she is a possible target for feeling excluded, which drives her to interact with the older friends that she has. In regards to the nervous system, an increase in estrogen secretion results in the activation of centers of the nervous system involved in the female sex drive and sexual behaviors. A particular theory which is associated in Kayla's situation is one known as the genotype-environment interactions. This is linked with the topic on behavioral genetics, associating genetics as a contributing factor in behavioral responses. According to the theory, both genotype and environment makes essential contributions to human development. Genotype-environment interactions are categorized in 3 forms: passive, evocative, and active. For Kayla, evocative interactions occur as her genetic characteristics results in the responses of others in her environment, and these could be responses of peers in her year group, as we know their opinion of her is that Kayla is withdrawn and doesn't share personal information. The theory of genotype environment effects has an impact on genetics. However, environment and genetics are 2 components that are interchangeable because in some ways genes shape the kind of environment we experience. During adolescence and emerging adulthood, passive genotype environment effects decrease and active genotype environment effects increase. This is reflected in Kayla's situation as she seems to have a high level of autonomy as she chooses who she wants to be surrounded with. The typical age of reaching puberty has declined steeply in developed countries over the past 150 years. Adolescents often experience their biological changes with limited information about the psychological and social implications of what is happening to their bodies. Being able to express their feelings to parents or guardians is an important aspect in order to feel as they belong. Reaching puberty means reaching sexual maturity. This can be seen in the case as Kayla's situation. She has been socializing with peers that are older than her age. This can potentially be a negative aspect towards Kayla, as the vignette identifies the peers having been reprimanded for using illicit drugs. Adolescent peers exchange information among themselves, but what they tell each other is not always accurate or healthy. Kayla's social connections seem to be with adolescents that are incapable of guiding Kayla to make the right decisions. Parents are often unsure of when or how to talk to their children about their changing bodies and their sexual feelings. For Kayla, this is seen as a barrier due to the fact that her parents have very limited English. It is evident that Kayla lacks a good support system, and this would affect her learning ability in the educational sphere. Kayla's emotional development is impacted by her early maturation, and emotions override cognitive process. This requires the learning or emotional management known as emotional intelligence, which is understanding and managing emotions. Emotional development during adolescence involves learning to cope with the stress and manage emotions. The strategy that will be implemented in order to increase Kayla's learning abilities and participation in class will be based on Castle Framework. Castle Framework deals with identifying emotions, recognizing strengths, perspective taking, appreciating diversity, managing emotions, goal setting, analyzing situations, assuming personal responsibility, respecting others, problem solving, verbal and non-verbal communications, building relationship negotiations and refusal. This framework will lead to a more positive Kayla.
We notice that Kayla's social development is classified from her bonding difficulties with peers her own age. Given her strengths in sport and art and her association with older students, we can deduce that Kayla may not have a confident nature in comparison to other Year 7 students. Furthermore, peer influence, identity exploration, and feeling of in between due to early maturity supports the causation that early biological development has on social difficulties. Arnett 2014 states in their article that developed women have problems in their adolescence because they're likely exposed to older peers who notice their maturation. This is explicitly true when considering the older peers Kayla is associated with. We notice Kayla has a preference to hide personal information from peers or teachers, a result which may reflect her poor class attendance and reluctance to engage in classroom activities. As mentioned before, her lack of social skills with peers her own age potentially jeopardizes her status within the school's social hierarchy. Also, looking at the association she has with older peers, although she isn't partaking in the use of illicit drugs, those she hangs around have been reprimanded for doing so and increase her risk. When we look into the social context of where Kayla comes from, we start to recognize external factors that may have caused Kayla to drift in her educational development. Most prominent is her parents' lack of language skills and the fiscal hardships they endure. Despite this, she does have a supportive environment to come home to. The benefits of this, however, only go so far, as it also explains the educational assistance she's missing out on from parents that may not be well educated and cannot afford to provide tutoring for her progress. Most importantly, Kayla has the support of us, a facilitator of education and social guidance, evident through conversations where she openly expresses forgetting class content but wanting to perform better in the hope of attending university. Assessing intervention strategies to assist Kayla with her social development include the introduction of group work into her classes. The intention of this method allows Kayla the chance to communicate with peers in her cohort that she'll be spending most of her time learning with. Obel 2010 expresses in her article that group relationships can be important sources of reliable alliance, feelings of inclusion, and enhancement of self-worth, and have been linked to both the current and future well-being of students. By allowing Kayla to express herself freely in the group work, there will be opportunities for her to help other peers and vice versa, and find social value in a productive group. Attached to the incentive of group work, we should implement the strategy of proximal development as established by Vygotsky. This is a strength-based approach designed to tackle her social difficulties through collaboration with more capable peers in relation to problem solving under adult guidance. This will assess her level of potential development as determined through a scaffolding lens. Sanders 2005 supports this strategy in her article as it is intended to demonstrate better learning skills through communication to her peers. By partnering with the learner in the educational process, the teacher can optimize the learner's growth and socialization in class, while the collaboration with learners in the zone of proximal development can facilitate the learner's growth toward high levels of potential and promote meaningful relationships inside and outside of school. Conclusively, in the context, we introduce the GRIP method as a precaution to ensure Kayla doesn't divert to the social habitus she experienced before. By A, gathering information, looking into the relationship she's developing while at school, whether she's communicating with appropriate peers and engaging or retaining classwork taught. B, respond, by communicating with Kayla as we have done before, negotiating a solution where we can get her to engage in quality learning. C, involve others, whether that be by recommendation to a school counselor, reviewing her class attendance progress, and privacy issues. D, by promoting a positive environment through performance-enhancing thoughts to impact the well-being of Kayla. While we maintain a positive relationship with Kayla, it is imperative that we instill a professional boundary so that we don't lose her trust in engaging with us as educators. This allows her to freely express her concerns and for us to find resolution to maintaining a positive learning experience for Kayla. Oh, it's good to see you so engaged, Kayla. How are you finding the new classwork?
Hi sir, thank you. It's easy to understand when I can see it applied in real life and you show us how to solve it.
Thanks. I know it can be difficult at times, and that's why I like to show it before you work in groups. I've noticed you've had help from the students over there.
That's right sir, they describe it another way. I guess we just communicate with work a little differently.
I agree, it's a different way to learn. I was thinking, if we can compromise like Miss Collins in art, then it'd make the subject more fun.
I think it does, because we get to talk about the content and I don't feel embarrassed to ask when it isn't making sense.
Well, how do you feel the work is when it gets easier and then it gets harder?
Well, I can do most of it, except the final few, which I ask my friends.
That's it. A little help from me and a little help from them.
And a little bit on my own too, sir.
That's what I want to hear. How come you're not with them now?
We're going to discuss it on Saturday.
Wow. Homework on the weekend?
No, sir, after the reviews.
I'm glad to see you're socialising outside of school. I guess if you need help, you know who to ask.
Teacher is always first, thank you.
I believe that even though I will be teaching English and history, I would be obliged to be aware of students' personal and social abilities that may impact on their learning experiences. After experiencing and engaging in the theory, research and practice in the unit, Adolescence, Development and Teaching, it has come to my understanding that the strategies that I as a teacher will use to create a learning environment in my classroom will not just be based on my KLA in English and history, but rather it's a combination of support systems and students' well-being and safety. Through the knowledge that I have gained in this, I believe that it has benefited me in many ways. I feel as though through incorporation of strategies such as social and emotional learning, as Santrop 2001 identifies that emotional development during adolescence involves learning to cope with stress and manage emotions. It will make it easier for me as a teacher to deliver the content that needs to be delivered and for students to feel comfortable enough, which leads them to experience a positive learning environment. I have also come to an understanding that developmental psychologist Erickson believes teens need to develop a sense of self and personal identity, as success leads to an ability to stay true to oneself, while failure leads to the role and confusion and a weak sense of self. This is an important part of adolescence as they develop their social skills and their identity. Understanding cognitive load foundations has led me to be aware and prepare of the pros and cons which I will face as a teacher. Making an appropriate decision in which way to deliver the content plays a massive role for students' learning experiences. As a teacher, I will try my best to reduce extraneous load. However, an example which is known as redundancy, which is two sources of information conveying the same message, example reading word for word from a PowerPoint slide. I honestly believe that redundancy is a really bad way of teaching. However, I feel as though that in English teaching, example poetry, places me in a situation that will lead me to have to present the content in a redundant way. As exposing the students to Shakespeare, for example, each verse has a rhythm of its own, and once the reader gets used to the rhythm, it becomes very natural to read, which may benefit them in this circumstance. The formal operation in adolescence explained in Piaget's theory states that this stage allows adolescents to reason about more complex tasks and problems involving multiple variables. Creating an engaging and challenging learning environment is a way to make students more engaged in their learning experiences.
On the direction of my students, I intend to prioritize their social and intellectual development in my lesson plans. I believe investing in their social and intellectual character aligns the qualities that are consistent in most environments within and outside of schools. Students imitate those who take an interest in their development, and despite the standards of academic achievement, their well-being is equally as important. As an aspiring teacher, my philosophy aims to influence students to confidently engage in the subject mathematics by providing stability and support when it is necessary. I am a firm believer that planning and revising needs the assistance of electronic resources to inspire students in achieving higher quality of work and understanding. Throughout the unit, I have better understood how the social and emotional frameworks relate to the development of students as implemented through APST Standard 1. Kern et al. Mention in their 2015 article that educational outcomes are determined universally, but perspectives of culture, character, and well-being are equally informative in preparing students for adulthood. Students need consistency between lessons, and I've learned to ensure that the other inputs in their lives are acknowledged but kept confidential so that they feel safe. Whitson 2009 supports the specific strategies in the developmental framework, concluding students want to learn and feel good about learning when motivation and emotion are evident in practice. I intend to carry this philosophy through my mathematics lesson by reducing the cognitive load of the content. The integration of ICT will help the learner to process information quickly while using proximal development to make the learning process easier for students to understand and apply learned concepts individually or in groups. Finally, utilizing the positive enhancing thoughts to enhance relationships within the classroom will engage students and allow them the opportunity to perform at their best. As a mathematics teacher, I play a huge role not only in the development of students for their future, but also to build their confidence and responsibility in a positive environment. These strategies will improve my students' well-being, work quality, and confidence in mathematics.